All right, we are back with another Johnnie Torch Live, episode number 24. A little bit late tonight, late night Johnnie Torch Live, if you will. As usual, unforeseen things happen to push the episode down, but I want to make sure I get to this week in comic book television before the end of the week, and another week begins. And so, here we are. So, let us take a look first at all the CW premieres of all of our favorite shows, and maybe some of our not so favorite shows. A good segue to show with Riverdale. Ah, Riverdale. You had to walk back into my life again. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. But here we are with season 2, the premiere. When last we left our intrepid group of Riverdalians, Fred Andrews was shot by a masked assailant in Pop Tate's chocolate shop. And the episode opens with Archie saving his life by rushing him to the hospital because the ambulance just wouldn't arrive, apparently. Fred keeps having these visions of his own mortality. Probably the best one was where Archie was getting married to Veronica and Pop Tate is performing the ceremony. That was pretty amusing. Thankfully, we didn't need to wait too long for Fred to come out of his coma. And this was actually a pretty good story to put Archie in the focus, unlike most of last season where pretty much everybody outshone him. But I thought KJ Apa did a really good job here. He did a really good performance. Um, Very moving. He did a really good job. There was a lot of Easter eggs, plenty of Easter eggs, and that's the thing about this show is you can tell that it's written by people that are at least knowledgeable about the Archie comics, even if they don't want to stay too closely tied to the squeaky clean, wholesome Archie comics that pretty much were the standby for decades. What do they have? They had Jughead called Archie by his superhero name, Pure Heart something or other. I recognize that. Um, the sheriff said the shooter was on Jingle Jangle, which was pretty amusing. If you don't know, that was one of the Archie's hit songs back in the 60s. There was a cameo of the new Reggie actor. I'm forgetting his name, but they did at least introduce him in a cameo. Reggie, of course, has pretty much gotten no screen time in this show, and I said before he's my favorite character, so that's pretty disappointing. We still have Cheryl Blossom acting like Wednesday Addams. She burned down the house, making the Talking Heads proud. They're just Talking Heads proud. Mrs. Blossom suffered third-degree burns, and evidently Cheryl intends to call the shots in the family from now on, ostensibly blackmailing her into keeping silent about the cause of the fire. Betty is still adjusting to Jughead being a Southside Serpent member, as we saw at the end of the last season. He's riding his dad's motorcycle now, and I get a kick out of his scratching a crown on the helmet in perfect Jughead fashion. I thought that was pretty funny. And Jug put his membership with the Southside Serpents to quick use, as you seen, using his pull to get the SSS to, bust a few heads to get some information. That was kind of interesting. At least we didn't have to wait long for Jughead to eat a hamburger this season. 6 episodes last year for that to happen. So there's that. And of course, we had Mr. Lodge, Hiram Lodge coming back. And it was like a big build-up all last season where he's coming back, he's coming back. Everybody treats him like Don Corleone or something. I didn't know the lodges were mafiosos or the Latina mafia, as it were. But, interesting. Interesting. It's funny that they're putting this show on in front of remake because it seems like it is trying to appeal to the same crowd. Um, it was a pretty decent episode, interesting, but basically just setting the stage. And the the um sort of after credits tag, so to speak, even though it's a TV show, they don't have after credits. But Mrs. Grundy is back doing what she does best. But now it looks like she's been assassinated by the same killer that was taking a shot at Fred Andrews. All I know is Frank Castle better come to town soon. They better see if they can get John Barenthal to make a, you know, 2 episode crossover here. Like they did in the comics, it's not unheard of for um, Frank Castle to come to Riverdale, get a Punisher crossover going. I'd love to see that. See Jughead interacting with Punisher. that would make that would make plenty of sense in this version. All the sense in the world. So all in all, another interesting experience with Riverdale. I still can't claim to be truly behind this show, but I had to check out the season premiere. It's the same show that we left it as. The actors are all really good. We got Kevin Kline also, as we see in this picture. He really didn't have anything to do. But all the actors, pretty much the rest of them, the main actors, Betty, Jughead, Archie, and Veronica, all were pretty good. Um, so I don't know if I was to give it a rank, a rating. I'd probably give this episode 3.5 stars out of 5. Yeah, 3.5 stars out of 5 for the Riverdale season 2 premiere. Okay, so let's see. What do we have next? We've got a lot of shows to cover here, so let's not waste too much time. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, rightaroo. Let's go up with Gotham next. This is it's the 4th episode of the season. I could be mistaken. So this one was written by our very own Ben McKenzie, our Jim Gordon actor. He is putting the pen to paper in this one. I thought the concept was pretty interesting. Penguin's meeting with Sophia. We'll start with that because that's the image I have up right here. I thought it was great seeing the Penguin in power. That's what was lacking from his character in prior seasons. And the Penguin's at his best when he's in power and not scratching and trying to claw to the surface. My boy Zaz again was just hilarious. He cracked me up. "Imma stab you." That was just the moment of the week. And it's funny because I never really liked Zaz in the comics. He always resembled to me all that was wrong with comic villains in the 90s. No color, no flash to him. He was just, "Ooh, I'm sick and crazy and I kill people. Ooh." But this Zaz is really quite a character, and I really hope they keep him around for the long haul. Uh, that's really where he belongs as a henchman to the Penguin. We have Ed's first riddle back after his defrosting with 2 rapping hobos. I loved it. It was just great. You know, Ed is still off his game apparently. Um, Not really doing very well with the riddles, but he's making his way around it with the rapping hobos. So that alone was worth the price of admission. Um, Now the Bruce subplot usually is one of my highlights of the show. I wasn't crazy about Bruce seeming to be so careless with throwing Ra's name around. He really needs to keep some things from Gordon, as he will apparently in the future. With his Batman persona, should they be faithful to the comics. Um, but he sort of just blurted everything out, and I didn't really think that was very Batmanish. Although he's not Batman yet, it's understandable, I suppose. I liked Bruce's relationship with Alex. It's nice to see him around someone his own age who's not Selina, and their conversation on the steps. That was really very nice. I thought, it was good to see Bruce Wayne interact with someone his own age. Um, the dog man, or whatever he was beyond disturbing. And his dying, going after a bone, was pretty funny though. But man, that was disturbing. And his keeper, the Undertaker, whatever that guy was supposed to be. Um, Pretty formidable guy. That was a decent fight scene, him and Jim Gordon. The ending was a bit strange. I'm not sure I could see Bruce letting Alex die over the knife. I mean, we all know Roz wasn't bluffing. Anybody that knows Ra's al Ghul. And if anyone was ever justified in pulling the trigger, it would be Gordon witnessing a kid getting killed right in front of him, but he restrains from shooting Roz. This doesn't quite seem like the Gordon of earlier seasons, which in a way is a good thing because I didn't particularly like him in the earlier seasons. Seemed kind of contrived that he wouldn't take the shot, considering Roz was just assassinating a 12-year-old or whatever Alex was supposed to be. All right, the Penguin and Riddler stuff was really great near the end. Mr. Freeze was hilarious too. Same pose as last time. That was really funny. They're really doubling down on the campy humor with the villains this year, and it's really elevated their game. I think it's they're playing all the right notes this season. It seems like they're not shying away from the goofier aspects of the show. The Penguin's ruse to eliminate his competition, well thought out, and I really liked Sophia's role here and her confronting the Penguin over how Carmine would have done it and how he was, a smarter, godfather, so to speak. I thought it was a good, it was a pretty good scene. It was a pretty good episode all around. I'm gonna say last week was a 5. This week's probably a 4.5. I'm gonna give Gotham 4.5 this week. Yeah, they're doing a lot better this season, and let's hope that they continue on in this way. I think last season they turned the corner and got on the right track, but they were still kind of really turned the corner here, and I think they're pretty much doing right by this show as much as can be expected of a Batman show without Batman. So, all right, we're gonna go next to what do we have here? Let's see. Let us go with The Inhumans. Oh yes, everybody's favorite show. Doesn't everybody love The Inhumans? Ah, maybe I'm the only one. Well, love is a strong term. Okay, so let us see here. Oh, there's so many notes. There is so many notes. All right, so let's start with the good things. They finally let Maximus off the chain a little bit. He had that tempestuous moment where he's, throttling the Genetics Council leader, his buddy, and they kind of had him mad. Excuse me, mad for a few moments. That's what I'm looking for, and I hope they escalate this as the show goes on, the show progresses more and more unhinged as the show goes on. Um, so I guess Maximus wants to go through Terrigenesis again and try to get it right this time and not be a human, and hopefully the inhuman DNA will come out this time during the Terrigenesis. Um, that way. I don't think it does, but I guess he wants to try. And I last week I was very wrong. I said I don't think Max wants to kill Black Bolt and the rest of the Inhuman family, but he made very clear he wants Black Bolt dead, so I stand corrected. Um, Black Bolt and the Hawaiian guy join Henry Ian Cusack, who is secretly working for Maximus. Kind of a swerve there. That I don't think that Cusack, I don't know his character's name on the show. I'm just going to call him Henry Ian Cusack. But I don't think he knows the whole story about Maximus because he seems kind of reluctant to want to kill the royal family here. But obviously something's up and he's in cahoots with him. So something's going on there. A quick question I have is if the royal family are all cousins, like Karnak is a cousin and Gorgon is a cousin, why are they all genetically different? I mean, of course, Karnak is Asian. Um, Gorgon is black. It's kind of an interesting thing that I wonder if the Terrigenesis made them different races, or are we just going to say they're cousins, so to speak, as in their kinsmen somehow from royal marriages or something. I don't know how that works. I'm just curious, and kind of has to be asked when you see them constantly saying they're cousins and so forth, because in the comics they were always drawn to look relatively, white Anglo-Saxon, but it's a curious question. I doubt will be answered, but I thought it was at least something worth being raised. Gorgon's still on the run from Mortis, and he's got his little posse with him. One of the guys is dead, and he's lugging him around. Um, it's kind of interesting, that storyline, but still not much to it. We've got Karnak in love. Karnak in love. He's going in swimming with the hot chick there from the pot plantation or whatever. It's kind of interesting. They got that crazy dude that's running that plantation thing. I don't know if he's jealous of Karnak or he's just, you know, paranoid, but whatever. He's going to be a problem, obviously, in the future coming up. Um, Pretty much Medusa was the highlight of the show. The episode was called something, Medusa stands firm or something. I don't remember what it's called. I should write down the titles for these episodes. I don't do that. I don't really think it matters. I mean, you know what the episode was this week. I don't have to call it by its title, but it was supposedly from this episode, and it was probably the highlight. She's ducking the cops with Louise and trying to find Black Bolt. I still like the flashbacks probably the most in the episodes. This was pretty much Medusa's flashback, seeing the flashback from her perspective of what happened when they were children, her and Crystal. Uh, Obviously, her parents were banished or something. I didn't know if they were banished or put to death or something, but that was interesting. And as for Crystal, Crystal met Dave, and Lockjaw needs a vet, so Dave calls his ex. Seems like a lot was cut out of that storyline. They kind of just hit the beats fast. That was something I thought they were going to drag out a little more. Apparently not. And I still think that he's going to be a love interest for her, but maybe not. I don't know. And so Medusa and Black Bolt get reunited at last, reunited, and it feels so good. And Mortis is still alive at the end, so that's cool because he's pretty much the most interesting character, I think, so far. We don't know jack about him, really. So, yeah, overall, I thought this was a much better episode than the last two. Uh, Kept my interest, they're building the plot a little more, the story is going along. Uh, so, yeah, I enjoyed it. And Mr. Whiteglove said a couple of weeks ago when we were reading the, I think it was the last episode, as a matter of fact, of our live shows, where he said it's like the Inhumans by way of Tim Story's Fantastic Four. Uh, Humans wouldn't feel out of place showing up in the Tim Story Fantastic Four. So that's pretty interesting, to think of it in those terms. But I don't suppose there are that many fans of the Tim Story Fantastic Four, but it does feel like it's set in that universe. I didn't mind Tim Story. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't really mind Tim Story's Fantastic Four. I preferred it definitely to the Fan Four Stick that came out and so forth. I think they should have went with a third, you know, film in that series, but at this point, it's all over. So I went on a little rant last week about Louise. She looks a little bit better in the light. See that picture there? She looks a little bit better in the light. Because she's been hanging around the dark the last few episodes. All right, so let us move on now from the Inhumans. Oh, if I got to give it a ranking, let me see. I liked it better this week. I'll probably give the Inhumans this week 4 stars out of 5. That's 4 stars out of 5. And we are going to move on now. This one is one of the shows that we were looking forward to returning. Let us see here. We have Legends of Tomorrow making their debut for the season debut. Let's see if we can get the image up there. Enough time getting up. Okay. So, this episode picks up where the previous season left off, where they're facing down dinosaurs in New York or what have you. Much like both the Flash and Arrow, this premiere episode, they really resolved the cliffhanger toot sweet. I mean, pretty much the whole problem that you expected to take a whole season was resolved in the first 5 minutes. I mean, the dinosaurs were taken care of by Rip and the Bureau or whatever, and they seem to have a knack for doing that. These CW shows just resolve the issue in the first 5 minutes, and we'll get on to something else. Um, I think it was less of a problem in this episode than it was in Arrow and Flash, but we'll get to Arrow and Flash in a few moments. Um, so all right, so let me take a look here at my notes. I didn't even look at my notes yet. All right, so we got to see the heroes in the real world. Sarah has a job in a like bed and bath, or whatever that equivalent is. It seemed like Nate was the only one taking the superhero gig seriously. He was hanging with Kid Flash. That was pretty interesting. A cameo of Kid Flash. Uh, Rip is looking very different, as you can see in this picture. He's, the head of the Time Bureau now. I personally would rather have him still on the team. I don't know if this is going to work. He's going to be sort of like the Commissioner Gordon of the show, I suppose. Now, I don't know. Let's see. This keeps moving. I'm gonna have to keep fixing this, I guess. Okay, here we go. And Sarah looks hotter than ever. Of course, there we go. Sarah, Katie Lotz. Um, Ray was officially declared undead, I guess, because he was taking a teaching position, I think, on the show. Well, not undead, but you know what I mean. And Mick is still a riot. He's still a highlight of the show. He's a beach bum when we meet him. Um, so I guess the legends were put out to pasture, and Mick runs into Julius Caesar. That was an interesting way to start the season, and I think their interactions were very funny. I thought that was really good. Um, Stein's daughter Lily is expecting. I don't know what's going on there, but rumors have it that something to do with Stein leaving the show. I think maybe spoilers. I don't know, but that's the rumor going around. That's why she's expecting. I don't know. I feel bad because I really like that actor, Victor Garber. He's really a treat on the show, so it would be sad to see him leave if that is true, that rumor. But so there was some Easter eggs here too as well, some nods. West tribute. Sarah was saying atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed. The classic Batman uh, kickoff to the show, at least in the early seasons, he would say that. And Stein said "Great Caesar's Ghost," sort of a Superman tribute. Firestorm calling himself Ares. Wonder Woman tribute. So they basically got the Trinity tributes in this episode, which was pretty cool. Uh, so the legends take matters into their own hands and return Caesar to Rome, but in typical legends fashion, they still manage to screw up time. In typical legends fashion, they always get it right the second time. So they return and do a final battle with Caesar in Rome. The legends, I thought, got to display their powers pretty good this time, because usually my biggest complaint with the show is we don't see Adam in costume. Firestorm doesn't, manifest. But they did give everybody a shot in the final battle. We got Citizen Steel, maybe a little bit too briefly for my taste, but he did power up. So that was um, that was fun. The guy playing Caesar was quite good. I thought he really sold me on being Caesar. And we got the coda at the end of Vixen. She apparently went back to 1942 to fulfill her destiny, because quite obviously she's not supposed to be out of time, because she has Amara. What is the name of the current Vixen? I can't remember, but she has to be in the timeline in order to have a daughter that's going to have a daughter that's going to be the real Vixen. So this kind of makes sense, but I think she's going to join up with the team in future episodes. It seems like she got a power upgrade, because now she's like sending out animal ghosts, and instead of an elephant or something, she was sending elephants out. Um, yeah. So Nate and Ray are still my favorite characters in the show. They were still a lot of fun to watch. So this one was a lot of fun. I mean, this was my favorite show last season of all the superhero shows, and I think quite honestly, this was my favorite episode of this week. So we're gonna name the season premiere of Legends of Tomorrow the episode of the week. I probably should have saved it for last if I'm gonna say that because you're gonna probably know the other episodes weren't as good. But I am gonna give this episode 5 stars out of 5. That's right. 5 stars out of 5 for the premiere episode of Legends of Tomorrow. And then we saw also that um, Time Bureau assistant or whatever for she's going to be an ongoing character. I think the assistant for Rip. Um, I think she's probably going to be a one in the side, so to speak, of the heroes. That should be interesting to see how that progresses. But so yeah, this was a really good episode, and I enjoyed it a lot. Let's move on now to let's see what do we got next. All right, let's go to The Flash. Oh yes, The Flash, also a very good episode I thought this week. Okay. Let's see. I think all the CW shows pretty much were good this week. I didn't really have a real bad problem with any of them, but um, now obviously last season the cliffhanger was pretty crappy. I think pretty much we all agree on that the cliffhanger was pretty crappy. Just out of nowhere, Barry decides, "Oh, I'm going to go into the Speed Force and take my place there or whatever." And the problem with this also is that it seems like the cliffhanger was resolved a little too easy. I mean, granted, it's supposed to be like 6 months or something, but it basically boils down to Cisco saying, "Oh, I think I can figure a way now. We'll get Barry out, and we'll be able to close that Speed Force prison without sticking somebody else in." And it just kind of seemed convenient. It's I guess we're supposed to think, well, it's been a long time, and you give Cisco 6 months, he can come up with something like this, but anyhow, in the absence of Barry, Kid Flash and Vibe are taking on the load by taking down Peekaboo and I guess a lot of other of the Central City criminals. Um, they gave just a throwaway line of Julian being in London. Of course, uh, he was a big part last season. Malfoy Draco there, but they just kind of just brushed him under the rug. Obviously he's not going to be in it this season. I think from what I heard, that didn't close the door that they're never going to bring him back, but he's obviously not going to be a regular this season. Um, Joe's moving on with Cecile. That was another subplot going on there, and that was pretty good. That was all right. All right, so basically, a flying samurai calls out the Flash, and so you know, um, Wally and Vibe try to take the load from the missing Barry to protect the city. Um, they recruit Caitlin back, and that's another thing. Caitlin, again, it's been 5 months, 6 months, or something like that, but it's interesting that it seems like she came back so quickly. It seems like give us an episode or two before they start resolving these things that they left hanging last season. It just seemed a little rushed. I don't know. But to be honest, Caitlin was my favorite part of this episode, so I guess I can't complain that much. We'll get to her in a second. I just want to still cover what's going on. We first meet her. She's tending bar and working for some unsavory characters. So, we'll get to that in a second. Now, the biggest problem I have with the episode was Iris. I thought that Candace's performance was really good, so I'm not really ragging on her as much as the character. I get that they wanted to make her strong in Barry's absence, and they didn't want her to be a blubbering mess and just being useless to the team. They try to make her a strong character, but hesitant to have Cisco try to bring Barry back didn't really sit well with me. It seemed out of character for her. I mean, if there's a chance someone can find your lost fiance, I'm guessing the only possible answer is yes, please. And she kind of was, I don't know, on the fence or something. There was an interesting. I don't know if anybody noticed it when Barry comes back and he's babbling and just you know going at light speed, so to speak. His brain seems to be going at light speed. He says something about being in jail. He says something about I didn't kill her or something, and that reminded me instantly of in the first season. I think it was when the Flash goes through the time. wormhole or whatever it was there, and you see Barry in jail, like on the phone or something. I wonder if that's going to come into play this season because that's like an interesting thing that they haven't gone back to, and it's been like 2 seasons. And the CW shows are not usually anxious to very quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised if they sit on that for like another 2 seasons. But that's the first thing I thought of. Are they going to go to that and do something with that this season? I don't know. Um, and of course, we had another Easter egg, a nod to Wally taking over as the Flash. We had Wally dress up as the Flash to try to stop the Flying Samurai. I don't remember what his name was on the show. I just call him the Flying Samurai, but he ended up being a robot at the end of it all. So I don't know if that was also consistent with the comics. Um, Iris puts herself in danger. That was an interesting thing, and it's a kind of convenient also that that snaps Barry out of his funk. And we got Barry in the new costume. I really didn't get a good look at it, but I think it's superior to the previous one he was wearing. It looks a lot brighter. It looks more like the color that he's known for in the comics. So that was pretty good. I think you're going to get a better look at it in the next episode, but because it was pretty dark, I think in the you know, but Flash's costume is not supposed to be that dark maroon. It's supposed to be brighter red, and so it looks like they're moving in that direction. Okay. The ending scene was pretty good. The action with the windmill farm there, whatever it was. It's not that the FX were so great, but I'm glad they're bold enough to try something cool like that rather than just play it safe. Because a lot of people would say, well, the FX don't really look that great, so why do they do it? But I'd rather have them try to do something and have it come off a little off all instead of having him just, run through a field and punch somebody. We got a cool windmill scene, and I mean, it's better than them not trying it. All right, so we got a first look at the Thinker, who is going to be the main bad guy this season. He's all tied up to a chair with the stuff connected to his brain. He's sort of like the leader to the Flash's Hulk, brain versus speed, just like the leader is brain versus brawn with the Hulk. So this should be interesting. Not another speedster this season. Everybody's complaining so many speedsters. We had them 3 seasons in a row. Like I said before, I don't mind that so much because it's sort of like when you have like Superman, you kind of have to have him fight a Kryptonian to give him a fair fight. And so with the Flash, you really kind of need a speedster to give him a fair fight because he could just basically take anybody down in 30 seconds or less. But obviously, you don't want to have a speedster as the main villain for the 4th season in a row. So I'm happy that they're breaking it up. All right, so the biggest thrill for me was the return of Killer Frost. Changes back and forth between personas, not unlike the Hulk where the anger causes the change. Apparently, they even had a clever nod where she says, "Don't make me frosty. You won't like me when I'm frosty," which I loved, of course, because I'm a big Hulk fan. He's my favorite character. So, it'd be really cool if she can't control the changes and she's going to change back and forth at will. And she's trying to come across like she's keeping it together and she has control over the Killer Frost side. But I'm glad they're not just dropping it entirely and just making her change voluntarily at will. It seems more of like something that she's suppressing that has to keep coming out once in a while. I think that was a character, Rosen Thorn, in the DC comics, which I always thought would make a great well, TV show or maybe a guest star on a TV show. Because a lot of people are saying like, who do you want to see on like Arrow or something? You want to see the Question? He'd be great. You'd want to see some other characters. I think Rosen Thorn is a great character that should have been given some kind of role in one of these shows. But I think they're doing that basically with Caitlin this season. They're going to have her be the alter ego that keeps coming out, and she tries to suppress her, and she fails more often than not. I'm looking forward to that. The last thing I wanted to say on in my notes though is the main three actors, Caitlin, Cisco, and Barry. They all look so much older now. When you seen them in the first couple seasons, they had like that baby face look, and they all look like they're a little bit more worn, a little bit more worn from the adventures and stuff. And interesting. I think pretty much like Stephen Amell, he still kind of looks like he did when he started out on Arrow, but it's interesting that this cast kind of looks like they've grown up a little bit, maybe because they started a little bit younger. I don't know, but I found that kind of interesting. All right, so we will move on now to our next episode. Oh, so the Flash, I got to give I think I'm gonna give The Flash 4.5 stars out of 5. Like I said, a little wonky with the stuff with Iris being a little, even Cisco kind of had a collar on it, being a little too out of character. So it takes it down about a half a point, but it was really strong, I thought, for a season opener. And I really enjoyed it. So 4.5 stars out of 5. All right, let's go to Supergirl now. That was our first show of the week, basically, and I used to like to watch these shows twice in order to try to really get a feeling for them, but now there's just too many shows on. I can't watch them twice. So I have to. Thoughts. All right. I thought this was a great season opener. I thought the beginning of the show was very exciting, a lot of action. Uh, all right, we've got Adrian Pasteur as the poor man's George Clooney, portraying. That's what I always thought of him as. They tried to make a shot of him being Michael Douglas in this episode. Lena Luthor makes a comment that he's sort of like a 90s Michael Douglas, but I always thought he was the poor man's George Clooney. He is playing. Um, that's right. I didn't write it down in my notes. I can't remember what his name is. Um, oh, that's right. Morgan Edge. All right. He's playing Morgan Edge. He's basically playing an older version of Max Lord. Whatever happened to Max Lord? I don't think anybody ever knew what happened to him because they just wrote him out after the first season. But he's basically playing the same character here. He's like a rich guy that's got some kind of innovative company or something. I don't know, but he's going to be the main heavy. He's sort of Supergirl's Lex Luthor, I guess, where he's going to be sort of like the untouchable corporate juggernaut, and they had the typical Supergirl interaction with him, the way Superman does with Lex Luthor, where he shows up and says, "Look, I got nothing on you, Luthor, but step out of line, and I'm taking you down. I've got my eye on you." You know, that kind of stuff. They did that with Supergirl and Morgan Edge here. Like I said, they did that too with Max Lord. It's, to me, I that never really appealed to me. That's why I always liked Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, where he's just an out and out skunk. He's an out and out weasel, and everybody knows it. And there's no pretense of, well, we're gonna wait for him to make a mistake, and he's gonna get in trouble. But anyhow, Cat Grant. Apparently, this is the way they're gonna handle Cat Grant in the future. She's going to be the press secretary, and apparently Wonder Woman Carter is still the president in this universe, and she's going to be the press secretary. And so they're going to stick her into the episodes all the time by just her having sound bites, which are basically not so subtle leftist jabs at Trump. And I could do without that because this show still is trying to be political when nobody wants it. I mean, come on. Do we really need to be, still doing the feminist crap, still doing the leftist crap? Just give us a good show. Give us good, exciting episodes. That's all everybody wants. We don't need to see the SJW stuff on the show constantly. And I think that's why they've lost a lot of fans in the past, in the recent past, because I think the last half of the first season was where they abandoned all that and they were just trying to tell good stories. They were trying to tell stories like For the Girl Who Has Everything, which was based on For the Man Who Has Everything. They did the Bizarro story. They did like Superman stories and they made them Supergirl stories, which was a good thing to do, a smart thing to do. That's what I think they should do. Go back to like the DC classics and just tell stories, even if they're, Superman stories that are basically subtly switched to fit her in the role. That's fine. Just don't keep playing with this SJW sandbox. Nobody really is interested. All right, we still got Sandverse, quote unquote Sandverse to deal with. I hope they don't take up 60% of the episodes like they did last season. Um, that, that show, Maggie, and there's going to be some kind of breakup. I imagine that's going to take the first half of the season, and the aftermath is going to be probably for a while. But praise the Lord if Maggie gets written out of the show because it just takes way too much time. And like I said before, it would be the same thing if it was Jimmy Olsen and Lucy Lane, and they just spent countless minutes of subplot time on their relationship. Nobody wants to see it. We don't care about the romantic subplot of any of the side characters. I mean, just drop it entirely and everybody be happy. But there's like a small vocal segment that is going to go crazy about this if this doesn't happen, and if they if they don't stay together and stay on the show. But I think the actress that plays Maggie has got a role, an offer on another show, and so she's obviously going to take a starring role on another show instead of continuing this subplot that's just going to carry on endlessly. But that's for the best. All right, the villain in this episode I thought was pretty good at Bloodsport. Now, I remember him from the comics. I don't remember a lot of these villains, but I do remember him from the comics. He was sort of a big guy with a big gun, like most villains in the comics were back in the '90s. I don't remember much more from him than that. I think he was in the early episodes, in the early issues of Superman, the revamp during the mid '80s when I was, still collecting comics. So not a lot to really hang your hat on there. You know what I mean? That's what a lot of those bad guys were back in the late '80s or whatever, when they just were like Punisher ripoffs. And that's pretty much what he was here. It's funny because I thought the actor that was playing Bloodsport was Mac. Was that Mac for a minute there? But no, it was a different actor. But it would have been funny to see like another actor from one of those shows showing up on the CW. That would be funny. Well, actually, Adrian Pasteur, yeah, he's actually General Talbot in Agents of Shield. So they already do have sort of cross pollination here. Um, there was the superhero in pain trope here is what they were going for, with Kara still hurting over Mon El's disappearance. We don't really know what happened to him. I think he was something I just barely remember because it's been a week since I seen this. But anyhow, as far as Kara's concerned, she doesn't know what happened to him, and so she's the superhero in pain. And I thought she played this very well. She's a great actress, Melissa Benoist. I've said that many times. And this is a very famous trope that the superheroes go through. I think usually Peter Parker does this best, where he wants to, obviously, Spider-Man no more. In some cases, I think Superman has done this as well, where he just wants to stay Superman and doesn't want to be the alter ego. And the same thing, like I said, with Peter Parker, is the opposite. He doesn't want to be the hero. He just wants to be Peter Parker. And so that's kind of what they were playing with here. And I thought they did a really good job of that, really, where she doesn't want to be Kara anymore. She doesn't want to be just a normal human. She wants to stay being the superhero, and I thought they played that very well. And the scene with her and Alex I thought was very good. This is the most I've liked Alex probably in a season and a half. End of the first season, where she confronts Kara about this and tells her, you know, Kara says she doesn't want to be Kara anymore. She wants to be Supergirl full time, and Alex says, Kara saved me more times than Supergirl ever did. That was very powerful stuff. I mean, that's good from a character that I'm not particularly fond of anymore, Alex. And Alex had a good scene with John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, where she asked him to give away the bride in her wedding, and that was also very moving. I like those two characters together. They're always a good combination, Alex and John. This sort of like adoptive father and daughter. I always got that vibe from them more maybe than with Kara. I mean, Kara's kind of like an adoptive daughter to Jean, but basically the relationship between he and Alex has been the best. And I'm glad they're not making Jean a stick in the mud like he was in the first season. He was like really unbearable, like uptight all the time, and now he's sort of, like the little type, like sort of like Joe West is in the Flash. He's sort of like a kind of gruff exterior, but he's kind of got a good heart deep down. I'm glad they've evolved the character, so to speak. Briefly, also want to touch on Jimmy Olsen in this episode. He confronts Kara as well. Although I think I side with Kara in this one. The signal watch is not a beeper, and I think we're supposed to, as the audience, side with Jimmy on this. That he's trying to call her in and talk some sense to her. But it just felt like he was more saying, look, do your job or you're going to get fired. I didn't think that was the time and place to say that because, he's using an emergency watch. Um, I don't know. I didn't understand that, maybe that scene. And like I said, I side with Kara. I don't think that was the time and place to do it. Oh, we also have to talk briefly about the main heavy this season is Rain. I don't know that character very well from the comics. Um, we didn't see her as a supervillain in this, but she's apparently the mom to a tween. which was interesting. I don't know, because I remember the actress that plays Rain during the off season, in between seasons, at the conventions and stuff. She kept saying this is going to be a villain like you've never seen before, and she kept saying this line over and over again. She couldn't say anything else about what she's playing other than it's a villain you've never seen anything like her before. And I have to admit, this is interesting. It's going to be like a single mom that turns into some kind of a monster. I have to admit that is very interesting, and I'm really eager to see how that's because when she's introduced in this episode, and I think her daughter, it's one of those things, firemen save my child or whatever. They all do that, and I forget someone was it Alex has to save her or something. I don't remember, I thought it was just an incidental character, something happening in the episode. But this was really our introduction to her, and she's going to be the main villain for this show for the season. So I thought that was interesting because it threw me until basically I was told online that that was our villain introduction. I'm like, what? Well, um, that's about it. I mean, Lena Luthor was in it again. I don't know. There wasn't too much to her this week. She was, taking on Max Lord. I mean, Morgan Edge, but not much interesting there. It was also interesting that we got Man of Steel and Superman Returns imagery in the same episode. So you had the Superman Returns imagery where she's up in the sky listening to all the people's problems and then flies down to take care of them. That was from Superman Returns, and then you had the Man of Steel homage where she's in the water with her arms stretched out and in the Christ-like pose, and she's floating in the water. So that was pretty cool. I thought that was interesting that they're like doing two in one episode. They're not holding back any of that. And of course, Melissa Benoist is just beautiful. I have to mention again. All right, so I'm going to give, I think, another 4.5 out of 5 stars would probably suit this episode, the season premiere of Supergirl. All right, so that leaves us with, for the CW, we have Arrow. I can't get the images up here fast enough. Pardon me, partner. Okay. We've got Arrow season 6, their premiere episode. And I too thought this one was very good as well. I think, you know, last season I didn't think it was like spectacular, but you could tell they got back on track after a terrible fourth season and a lackluster third season. I mean, let's face it, the second season was the best so far. So Arrow is back and brutal as ever. I got to get this out of the way because you know how I am with heroes killing, and that bugs me. It looks like he's putting fools down with kill shots again. That kind of disappoints me. I like superheroes not to kill unless you're something like the Punisher and you're an anti-hero and Wolverine can get away with it, stuff like that. But when you're talking about supposed to be the altruistic heroes, they shouldn't be just killing. I don't like that too much. The thing that bothers me most is I think they can't make up their minds if he's a brutal killer or an altruistic hero. It would be cool if they would make up their mind and just say one way or the other how they're going to keep him. Because if they just kept him in one way or the other, it would be fine. But they keep going back and forth. Last season, he's like a killer again, and the season before that, he decided not to kill, and then the season before that, he was killing. And oh, gee, make up your mind already. And then he pins the guy to the ship with the arrows through the shoulders. That was like brutal stuff. All right, so they didn't really waste any time letting us know that the whole team made it off the island, because that was pretty much the cliffhanger was, did everybody make it off the island? And yes, they let us know pretty early on that pretty much everybody made it off the island, except one person, which we'll get to in a moment. But the flashbacks this season apparently will revolve around what happened in the past on the island before it exploded. At least in this episode, I don't know how long that's going to last. Um, so yeah, Wild Dog finally got a costume upgrade, and that was pretty cool. He's not just wearing a hockey mask anymore. So I thought that was pretty cool. One of the most exciting moments for me was Raza's back. Anybody remember Raza from the pilot episode? She was like the Mexican maid or something, and they had her in, like, I forget if it was 2 episodes, maybe 2 or 3, and she was written off the show, and the showrunner, I think, joked that she got arrested or something and for solicitation or something. But they have an excuse to bring her back now that Ollie's a single dad. So let's talk about that for a minute. I don't know what they're gonna do with a single dad subplot. It's kind of like a sure ticket to nowhere. I don't know really where they can go with that. I still don't know why they didn't name the kid Connor Hawk. Unless, of course, maybe they're planning on killing him off and they want to save the Connor character for the future. They made Diggle's son Connor Hawk, which is strange because it's supposed to be Ollie's son, and Ollie does have a son in the show. So I don't really understand, the logic there. But I mean, this is Arrow after all, so who knows? All right, so yeah, so the only one that didn't make it off the island apparently was Samantha, which is William's mother. She's gone the way of all flesh, and I guess the die is cast. She's dead and buried. I don't know if they can go back on that. Of course, this is or everybody's dead and comes back. So I mean, we can't really. And also, children change genders. Like Sarah became John. Anything goes. Anything goes in the Arrow universe. So who knows? Speaking of Diggle, John apparently has the yips. He can't fire a gun anymore. That's what his plot is going to be this season, I guess. I mean, I'm looking forward to Diggle getting a good plot because he really hasn't had one. I don't think since ever. I don't think. Last season was what he was in jail and he was trumped up charges or whatever. And the season before that was the Andy saga where he kills his brother at the end of it all, which was terrible. Season before that, I guess, was his best. When he was like kind of trying to lead the team in the absence of Oliver in the third season. I don't know. Second and first season, he was just sort of sidekick and didn't really have a plot, I guess. But so I like Diggle as a character. I think they sort of just veiled saying that he had some kind of injury. I guess that's doing this to him. He was like looking at his shoulder or something, and I guess that's the reason why he's having trouble. The gun because that's his gun arm or something. I don't know. So let's take a look at this picture here we've got of the Black Canary. Black Canary is finally in costume this season. Our new Black Canary, the Dinah Black Canary. And of course, her adversary is still Black Siren, who is the doppelganger of um, Laurel Lance. I'm glad to see Katie Cassidy still on the show in a different way, and she plays a good villainess. I thought she was pretty good, and she broke that Crazy Harry guy out of lockup. I thought that guy was great. I was cracking up with him. He was like Crazy Harry from the Muppets. Crazy Harry plays with dynamite and just blows crap up. I would like to see more of him. I don't know if he's going to be like a recurring villain with Black Siren or something, but I was just getting a hoot out of him. He reminded me of like a 90s Flash villain, on the Flash, where they would just have like these, crazy guys, and he didn't necessarily come from the comics, but he was, sort of reminiscent of that. I just love when they throw in some kind of random crazy guy. Um, Gotham does that more often, I think, but I would like to see it more on the CW shows. But I thought he was funny, Crazy Harry. Yeah. All right, so um, the Black Canary costume, Black Canary going up against Black Siren, and they couldn't help but make a fishnets joke. I mean, come on now. Ws are never going to allow the fishnets on Black Canary, but don't rub it in our faces. I mean, come on, dude, don't do that. You know what I mean? Just let it go since you're not going to ever do it. We know you're not going to ever do it. Don't point it out. You know what I mean? That's adding insult to injury. Quentin Lance, still great performance out of him. He's a great character. I'm glad he survived so long because it seems like out of all the characters, he'd be the one that you just would off and not really need in the future. But he really brings a lot to the show, and they gave him a great storyline. I think that they probably use all season with him and Black Siren sort of matching wits, and he doesn't want to kill her because she's loyal to him, which really she's not, and there's no way that they could really play that up because she is a completely different character. I would prefer to see it more from her side of the story and see what she thinks of when she sees Quentin. Did she have a good relationship with her Quentin Lance, with her father? Is it hard for her to sort of mistreat him or whatever? Because you could see the drama is that he doesn't want to kill her, he doesn't want to fight her or whatever because she looks exactly like Laurel. It's a great subplot. It's made to order for Quentin, and hopefully they do something good with it. Just not just like milk it for drama, but try to do something constructive with it to make it have that pop. All right, so Thea, of course, we have to catch up with Thea. Thea was the only one that didn't make it off the island unscathed. She's in a coma, which is probably the writer's way of saying we have absolutely nothing for you to do right now, so sit on the bench until like mid-season, which is a shame because I really like Thea when she's written well. There's a couple of moments, but probably in all seasons that she wasn't written well and she was like an annoying character. But I thought last season was a particularly strong season for her, where she was the campaign manager and she was sort of becoming Moira. That was like an interesting development to take there. And I'd really like to see her as Speedy more because I like seeing her as Speedy even more than seeing her as Thea. So that was interesting. And of course, Slade Wilson still on the show. He only drops by briefly, really, besides beside the flashback, and to tell Ollie that he's looking for Joe and he's gonna rekindle things with his son Joe. Now, I still can't really get behind a good guy Slade. I mean, he did kill Ollie's mom, lest we forget. But to be honest with you, his going crazy over his love for Shadow was pretty ill executed in the first place. So his return to sanity being less convincing is par for the course. I mean, it's sort of like they just came out of nowhere and said, well, the Mirakuru made his sort of brief crush on Shadow turn him evil. And then 5 years later, he comes to Star City, or was it Starling at the time? I think it was still Star, but whatever. And he kills Moira and he puts Ollie through the rigmarole. And then he's put in prison and then he fights Ollie and Thea. And then, like, well, the Mirakuru just wore off and he's back to normal now. And it was just like ill-conceived all along the way they kind of had him turn. Although I guess it makes sense that if the Mirakuru was what caused him to go bad, it wearing off would make sense. But it's just convenient that it just happened after a period of, I guess, 6-7 years. That's how long it takes Mirakuru to wear off. I don't know. The action was, as always, second to none. I always praise Arrow's action scenes. They do a great job. The hand-to-hand combat and stuff. They didn't have like a big helicopter scene like the last season's first episode, but it was still a pretty action oriented episode. I thought it was pretty good. I'm glad that they didn't just gloss over the subplot with Renee's daughter. When we left him last season, he had the hearing to get his daughter back custody, but he got kidnapped by Prometheus, and it really wasn't his fault. So it's good to see that, to get him back um in a hearing with his daughter to get custody back. So I mean, that was good. They didn't just milk that for more drama. At least so far, they haven't. Curtis is still. Why is he still on the show? I don't know. I mean, his favorite character. We don't really need him with Felicity. He's not Mr. Terrific as the comics depict him, so he's really a waste of space. Speaking of Felicity, they're still not pushing the Elicity button too much. That's good news. They could fall back into their old ways, but I think they learned their lesson. And last season, they backed the heck off of it, and I think they're going to keep her kind of at arm's length. They're not gonna. They had like a passing reference to her mother. Again, it's like a running joke now. Oh, her mother, because everybody hates her mother, and they keep acting like, oh, she's in Vegas again. She's not going to be on the show this year again. Hey, so they're doing right so far. I can't really complain about this episode. Well, talking about next episode though is what I'm worried about in the coming attractions. It looks like Ollie's being outed again. Oh, how many times are we going to do this already? I wouldn't mind, but they did the outing episode way back in, what was it, the third or fourth episode of the first season, and we're still doing it again this season. I mean, that was the smart thing where they did it way early on in the first season, as if to say, look, we know that people are going to point fingers, Oliver, and say, it must be you. You came back around the same time as the Hood showed up and this and that. And so they did the smart thing and they had him, plant the evidence to try to show that he wasn't the Arrow or the Hood or whatever it was called in the first season. And that was supposed to like drop the suspicion. So from then on, we could just say, oh, all right, he proved he's not the Arrow. And from now on, nobody will ever bring it up again. They bring it up every freaking season. Somebody figures out he's the Arrow. Somebody accuses him of being the Arrow. Somebody's, it's just, just drop that storyline, please. Now they're going to have a new DA or something going to, persecute him or whatever, run him through the rails, trying to figure out if he's the Arrow. Just stop. I mean, I know that's kind of a trope for like the vigilante characters where they try to find out who the vigilante is, who's the Batman and this and that, but they don't do it like every freaking episode of every season. I mean, it's just too much. Too much. But overall, yeah, I like the episode and it seems like it's going to be another promising season. They look like they're doing everything right so far. I got to give this episode, let me see. Hmm, I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars out of 5. I was close. It's between 4.5 and 5, but I'm still kind of tentative. I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars out of 5. So that is Arrow for this week. We still have, I think. Let me just check briefly to get an image for for the Gifted. So I'm gonna have to do the Gifted without an image here. So apologies. Excuse me. Apologies. But let's see, the Gifted, because that was early on in the week. Let's see. All right. The Gifted. All right. We picked up where we left off with the Strucker dad getting arrested while the others got away. I found it interesting. I didn't mention this last week, but the name Strucker, is that a play on the name Stryker, which is famous in the X-Men? Stryker from the Wolverine, and he was the one that did the experiment on Weapon X and stuff. I don't know if that's what that's coming from. It's either that or Strucker is Baron Strucker from the Avengers movie. Remember him? He was killed by Ultron and all that. So we know it's not really, linked to that because they can't, interconnect the universes. But I just find that name interesting that they picked the name Strucker for this family. Okay, excuse me. I'm just taking a sip of water. Blink was spazzing out from hyperextending her powers most of the episode by opening portals all over the joint. And Lauren is the one that can use her powers to close the portals. That was interesting. It gives her a little bit to do this episode. Andy didn't get that much to do. But it was okay. He kind of had, I think, most of the first episode. Marcos and Amy Acker go off to get her the proper meds. I found out online, I think Marcos' X-Men name is Eclipse. Like I said, I'm not familiar with that character. I didn't read any comics with him in it, so I don't know. But obviously, he's a established character in the X-Men universe. I thought it was interesting, his wound with the electricity coming out of it. That was pretty cool. Polaris, meanwhile, is adjusting to life in prison. The orange is the new black setting there for her. And they revealed her green hair, which was cool because I was kind of worried about that. I was like, why didn't they give her green hair? The nerdy little complaint that most of us have. But they showed that, yeah, she actually does have the green hair. She was just covering it up, I guess, to try to, be inconspicuous with the, underground movement that she was in. Do want to bring attention to herself. She's a good actress, that girl. I don't know her name, but she's still like my favorite character. I just like to see her get out of that jail, and I think the coming attractions show that she is going to, eventually. But to see her like cut loose and do something would be really interesting. The Bargain Basement X-Men have a pretty nice pad. I don't know if that's supposed to be Xavier's school, and that's fallen into like disarray or something. It's fallen into disrepair, and but that's kind of a sweet pad for sort of an underground gathering and stuff. That's pretty interesting. Um, so yeah, Polaris is expecting, and I don't know if she's still expecting after that beatdown she got from the other. I don't know what her name was, the big bad lady. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I don't know if she ever had children in the comics, Polaris. I'm not sure. And of course the Strucker dad is they're trying to get him to think on the mutants, and it's pretty interesting because it's like you don't really know what he's going to do in this situation. It seems pretty it's not cut and dried. They got his mother. um I think that's Lacey from Cagney and Lacey. It's interesting because the same year they got Lacey from Cagney and Lacey. Spider-Man Homecoming has Cagney, in the beginning of the episode, in the beginning of that movie where um Michael Keaton, Vulture, gets in trouble with the feds or whatever. That was her. It's just an interesting, you know, scenario that turned out. But yeah, not too much more to say about this. I thought it was a great episode. I don't have a lot of notes about this one, but it's sort of like building. We're gonna find out what happens next week, tomorrow, I guess, and find out what happens. So I thought it was a good episode. Let me see. I would give this episode 4.5 stars out of 5 again. Pretty much everything was pretty top notch this week, except I thought Inhumans was a lot better than it's been. Riverdale is just Riverdale. I mean, I'm probably never gonna give that 5 stars. I don't know, but I didn't get to see MacGyver this week or last week for that matter. So I imagine when I do catch up, comments about how MacGyver's going. But that's about it for another edition of This Week in Comic Book Television. Yeah, a little bit over an hour we've gone. We're gonna do a Torch News roundup probably next week. There isn't much news that I got to touch on. I would have probably tried to throw it in here. The only thing is the New Mutants trailer dropped. I'll go into that a little bit in the next video. I could probably just do it now because I don't have a lot to say about it, but then I would have to call this episode the Torch News Roundup, and it's not. We're basically just doing This Week in Comic Book Television. So, with that out of the way, don't forget to smash that like button. Smash it. That's what all the kids say nowadays. So that's what you're supposed to say when you end a video. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed. And click the link in the description below. You'll check out my comics. You can check me out on Twitter. You can check out the Mice Expo that I'll be going to next weekend. So there probably won't be a show next Saturday and Sunday. I don't know when I'm going to do my week in comic time. It probably will be either Friday or Monday, depending on if I can see the shows enough. Actually, yesterday I watched like 4 shows back to back because I was so backed up. I had to see Arrow, Riverdale, Inhumans, and Gotham all like in back to back sittings. So yeah, it depends on how soon I can get to them all. When the next episode will be. But until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.